All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first Strategic Planning Committee meeting for the Avon Grove Charter School of 2022. I can't believe that we made it through. I hope everyone had a great holiday season and everybody was healthy and safe. So we're going to go ahead and call it to order and begin with, was there any comments, questions, or corrections for the December 14th meeting minutes? Did everyone get to review those? I remind everyone we put them in board docs. You should be able to access that. If you have any concerns, you can always reach out. But was there any questions or concerns?
I reviewed, there were no questions or concerns.
All right, thank you. So with that, we'll just move along, and I'm going to turn it right over to you, Brian. I'm going to mute myself and just listen.
So good evening, everybody. Again, Happy New Year. Three items on our agenda tonight. One is a follow-up from our December meeting. So at our December meeting, we shared and had a quick discussion about a first draft calendar for the 2022-23 school year. We discussed what that looked like. We talked a little bit about the potential for adding some additional professional development planning time for our teachers in the form of some intermittent half days or early dismissals throughout the year as well. And after that meeting, I had sent out a survey to all of our parents, just trying to get some additional information and feedback related to some of the items that we discussed at our January meeting. So tonight I wanted to go over some of those, the data that was collected from the parent survey, and then continue a little bit and look at those draft calendars again and open up the discussion. Again, our goal was that we would have a draft proposal to the board for the working session and at the meeting on I believe it's the 24th, with a potential board vote that evening or looking to February. So this would be one of the final times to give some additional feedback about those draft scenarios. So just to reiterate some of the constraints that we're under when building these calendars, we're looking to make sure that our school calendar contains at least 180 school days. And then we make sure to ensure to provide at least 900 hours of instruction for our elementary grade levels, and then 990 for our secondary levels. So that's part of the charter school law and in the school code. Another outstanding question that I don't think we're going to get an answer to anytime soon, it probably won't be till later in the spring or even into the summer, would be whether or not any type of waivers are given from the Department of Education related to instructional time, allowing for building of asynchronous work and into our calendar like we did this year with some of our conference days, and the department being explicit about that. So that's still sort of a hanging question. Some other things that we talked about in December that I think it's important to reiterate is when we're looking at the calendar, we try to make sure that we're talking about the precedents that we set with some of these things, and that we are trying to build a calendar that can be consistent over a number of years. A simple example is that we don't jump back and forth between starting before Labor Day and after Labor Day, and then before Labor Day and then after Labor Day. So consistency is really, really important. And that we're able to, when we're looking at the calendar, project out for the next 2 or 3 years, that the breaks that we give, that the structure that we have is something that we can continue to implement year over year. We had talked about a fall break, what conferences look like, and spring break. Another important sort of constraint on our calendar is the Department of Education and College Board testing schedule. So that's when the PSSAs, when the Keystone exams, and when our AP exams are scheduled. And those are oftentimes scheduled. We don't have a lot of flexibility in those date windows. So, as much as we might want to end sometime in May, if that end date is right in the middle of when College Board says we're supposed to be giving AP exams, it's not really something that we would be able to do. So we have to take that into consideration, as well as how much planned instruction is being offered before those windows. So, the goal is really to get as much instruction and instructional hours prior to the PSSAs or the Keystone exams or AP exams, because sort of oftentimes after those assessment windows, the students have taken sort of their high stakes assessments already. The end of the year is always a consideration. There are parts of our buildings that are still not air conditioned. So, when we have talked about what our goals are in the past of building calendars, it's always been, let's get out as early as we can in June, because some of the buildings can get hot. Some parts of the building can get hot. So it's always something we take into consideration, as well as teacher and student mental health. Building in breaks throughout the year, how we utilize some asynchronous learning. Our teachers have been asking for additional in-service and planning time, and how we kind of balance the needs of students, the needs of and the needs of adults that are kind of going here. And that's adults, both of our staff as well as our students' parents, because we realize that when there are half days, when there are asynchronous learning days, like that can be disruptive to working families and childcare issues and things like that. So we try to take all that into consideration when looking at what these calendars look like. So when we asked our parents, I would rather question about the start of the year. The majority of parents said they would like to start after Labor Day, with 56% of the respondents. Now, only 307 or 314 people responded. And then behind that was the week prior to Labor Day at 35. We did do a post Labor Day start this year. I believe that's the first time that we've ever done that. Most school districts in and around Chester County do a pre-Labor Day start. And again, I think it's important to note that if you start later in the school year, you always go later into June. So like we have to fit 180 days into the year, and you can kind of slide that up and down here and there, but it's very hard to find additional days when looking at a pre and post Labor Day. But that was asked. The other one we wanted to get feedback on was about Thanksgiving break. So the two options were to have half days of school on Monday and Tuesday with parent-teacher conferences, and then Wednesday through Friday being off for Thanksgiving, or having students have a full week of school off and having parent-teacher conferences scheduled on Monday, Tuesday. However, that would be 2 days of school that we would have to find or make up somewhere else in the school calendar. So again, you oftentimes default to, if there's 2 days lost in November, you're sort of adding it to the end of the year and making the end of the year longer. So the vast majority of parents said bring them in for the half days and get those 2 days of school along with parent-teacher conferences. And then there was a spring break question. We had in previous years had a full week off of spring break. And then in the recent past, we moved to a Thursday, Friday, Monday holiday for spring break. So we wanted to get feedback on what parents thought about spring break. And it was a pretty even split between having a full week off for spring break, and then what we had the last couple years of a Thursday, Friday, Monday. So that was a pretty even split on where parents were at with that. And I did share with everybody on the strategic planning committee the raw information so that you can go into those Excel documents and check out some of the anecdotal comments that were made by parents on how they answered and why they might have answered a particular way. In the December meeting, we had talked about the potential of adding some intermittent half days throughout the schedule for some additional planning and in-service. We wanted to gauge the level of support that our parents have for that particular plan, because that can be a disruption to parents' schedules. So based on the 314 responses, the majority were in favor of that. I think most of the comments that were in favor also noted that as much forewarning would be appreciated, that as long as they know ahead of time, they can have arrangements made, particularly for younger students who might need an adult or an older sibling home for them in that afternoon. And then we asked, if permitted in subsequent school years, I support utilizing asynchronous learning days within the calendar. So this was a question really geared towards some of those conference days. So this year, on that Monday, Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and in March, during our conference days, we were utilizing asynchronous independent learning days for students so that those days counted as instructional days. But then we were also able to hold parent-teacher conferences and it not be like a day off of school for students that we have to make up later in the school year. This is sort of a similar approach to what school districts are able to utilize, which are called Act 80 days that charter schools are not able to utilize. So we are able to give students work to do at home on a day that they might have already been home, right? But we're now able to utilize that as a school day through some independent work, and then kind of kill two birds with one stone. Have a day of school counted, as well as facilitate parent-teacher conferences. And then finally, we asked if we were to implement the half day, those intermittent half days throughout the months in which we already didn't have sort of longer breaks, what day of the week worked best for families? I think I knew what this answer was going to be before asking it, but it was overwhelmingly Fridays. I think for families, it's very easy then to kind of start the weekend early. And I would guess that Fridays are probably the easiest for working parents to try to request off going into the weekend, as opposed to like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So we wanted to take that into consideration when potentially building some of these drafts. So I wanted to pull up the two draft calendars again, just for the sake of going through it. This one is draft one. Okay, so you should be able to see a draft calendar. This was the main one that was discussed in December with a few slight modifications. It includes a pre-Labor Day start. And again, that pre-Labor Day start really is focused on making sure that here down at the end of the school year, that we're not going into that almost third week of June. That's getting into hot weather, and you get into student and teacher fatigue at that point. And really, you're not robbing any of the summer months. You're just sort of getting the days on the following summer in June. We then had a mini fall break for students in October, where there was a 4-day weekend for students, a 3-day weekend for staff, and then staff would come in for an in-service day on Monday the 10th. This calendar draft included the half days of conferences on the 21st and 22nd of November. If permitted, we would most likely look to move those two to asynchronous learning days for students. So they would be home for the week. They would have independent work to do on Monday and Tuesday, and we would hold parent-teacher conferences on those days. But until we get a little bit more clarification from the Department of Ed regarding some of that flexibility, we left the half days on there so that we could ensure that those 2 days would still be counted as 2 instructional days for our 180-day requirement. Next year's winter holiday break is a short one. And we did add in Monday the 2nd as an additional day off, extending the break 1 day and giving an extra day of transition, as opposed to coming back on Monday the 2nd. That's a day where, if we have additional discussion about what the school year looks like and it continues to move the end date of June back further, that we could come into school on Monday the 2nd and then end 1 day earlier. So that would be sort of a swap there. We then have in-service and our semester break on the tail end of the Martin Luther King holiday in January. Moving through February, we have off President's Day. In March, there would be 2 half days and an in-service day. Just like in November, if permitted to utilize asynchronous learning, the way we did this year, we would look to transition that Wednesday and Thursday to asynchronous days, count those as school days, and hold parent-teacher conferences. This particular calendar has a full week off of spring break, which is scheduled next year from April 3rd to the 7th. And with a full week off for spring break, you can kind of look ahead to the end of the year, and you would have a final day of school on Thursday, June 8th. So that means you'd be coming back from a Memorial Day weekend holiday, do 4 days of school, and then come back the following week for 4 additional days of school, with the last day of school being a half day. If we did a Thursday, Friday, Monday spring break, you would be netting 2 days in April. So we could technically then move the last day of school back to Tuesday, June 6th. So that would be sort of the trade-off there. If you want to end school 2 days earlier in June, you could take 2 days from spring break, or is a lengthy spring break at the beginning of April before you really go into a rough patch of consecutive days. You can see there then through April and May, the students go, 7 weeks of 5-day-a-week school, sprinkled in there with PSSA testing and Keystone exams. So that can be, kids have to have some stamina, and the teachers really need stamina to get through that much consistent schooling plus testing. So any questions about that draft? It's pretty straightforward. Any questions, comments, or recommendations for me to note as for additional discussions with school administration? That was a lot too, so digest.
Brian, did you see that comment?
Where
would we? All right, where might we put the half days for students, PD for teachers?
I'm going to share that in the next. There's another draft one I'm going to share that has some of the half days sprinkled in.
Okay.
So this would be a draft without having those additional half days of PD and teacher planning.
The only comment I would have is that January 2nd, I have no feeling either way, but that in the corporate world, that'll be probably the holiday. So there may be
probably the bank holiday. Yep.
So there may be people traveling. So that might be a challenge there, but I don't know about that for sure.
And that's one where we could, if you wanted to come to school on that day, then we could move the end of school to June 7th, right? You end on a Wednesday. We also try to take into consideration when the graduation ceremony is going to be scheduled in June. We try not to have that on a Friday night, if we can avoid it.
Yep. Anybody else have any comments? A quiet group after the holiday.
It's okay. All right, so the next one, and I'll go through this quickly because it's very similar. It just has some additional days in here. So this is a very similar calendar, but with some additions of those half days. So same start, and we started to add in some Friday half days, or I put them on Fridays in this draft to honor that request that was overwhelmingly the majority of what parents had said would work best for their schedule. I think that, letting kids go early on Friday and then trying to have a productive Friday afternoon might be a different discussion that we have to have internally from an operations standpoint as the school. But I put that in here just to so everyone can see what it looks like on the calendar. So you had a half day on September 16th, another half day instead of a full day off on October 7th. So that was that fall break where students and staff were off the 7th, and then staff had an in-service on the 10th, a full day of in-service on the 10th. We would let students leave for a half day of school on the 7th. We would have afternoon professional development and planning, and then a follow-up of a full day of scheduled in-service on the 10th. Now, I think that might be where somebody asked the question of, if you have a half day of in-service on the 7th, do you really need the additional full day of in-service on the 10th? So going into the next couple years, we do have some and we're going to talk about some of it tonight and the third agenda point, some consultant work and some contractors coming in to offer to facilitate professional development with our staff who need those full days of time without students. So that's why you may see some of these half days sprinkled in along with those full days that were already on the last draft calendar. The Thanksgiving break stayed the same. You'll see that I didn't add a half day in November because we had a full day in service, and then you had Thanksgiving break there with 2 half days already potentially on that Monday, Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So we didn't put it with parent teacher conferences. So I didn't add another one there, and I didn't put one in December because everyone's gearing up for the holidays, and then we go off onto break. So those 2 months I didn't add one to. January, we had a full day in service. This was one where we had a semester break. I didn't add one in there, but we potentially could put one on just like we had done in October on the 13th, which would be the end of the semester. But was trying to be conservative with the amount of half days. You can see a lot of red on here at this point on the amount that we added in. In February, it would be a half day on the 17th, which would then allow students to leave early to go off onto their 3-day weekend for President's Day. And we would have professional development and planning on that Friday. Conferences stayed the same in March because we had those 2 half days with conferences and a full day in service. I didn't add one there. We did one in April, right before the beginning of the PSSA window. We typically will then start PSSAs on that Monday or Tuesday, April 24th or 25th. So that half day there would be good in-service time and prep time sliding into what our testing schedule looks like. And then did not have one in May just because of the amount of assessments that are going on between the PSSAs, Keystones, and AP exams. This calendar, because we did not have a full day off of school in October on that Friday the 7th. We were able to end school on Wednesday the 7th as opposed to Thursday the 8th. And that would meet our 180-day calendar requirement.
So Brian, if you took those 2 days in spring break, the 3rd and 4th away, so now you could end on the 5th.
You could end on the 5th. And then you could go. Ending on the 5th tough. You're bringing kids back to school.
Right. Now I'm just asking. Yeah, that was where it was going. Yeah.
If we were trying to end a little bit earlier, if you really wanted to do, then look at spring break and pulling 2 days out of spring break. I'd also then recommend not having off Monday the 2nd of January and then have the last day of school be Friday the 2nd. From a staff and teachers perspective, that can be a tough window to try to get. Final grade, Keystone testing just ended, get final grades done, get senior grades done, hold graduation, all within the Tuesday, the 30th, the day after Memorial Day to that Friday. That can be a tight window of time. It's not impossible, but it is tight. And if there's any teachers on here who feel differently, please speak up. But that's kind of what I see when I see trying to sprint through 4 days right after Memorial Day and then end the year.
No, I agree. That's what I was kind of wondering what you would end up doing if you thought about that. That would be hard coming back on a Monday.
I don't think attendance would be very high on that day.
No.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw Bonnie asked it's a question is the comment that you made earlier. She wanted to know why it's desirable to hold graduation on an evening in the middle.
So we actually had talked about holding a weekend graduation. So the way it comes down to a couple things. So we have to, when we're required to have a 180-day school calendar, and when we submit to the Department of Education, we have to submit PIMS reports that basically say for each group of students, how many days of school did they go to school, and how many hours did they go to school. And one of the reporting lines that we have to do is how many days of school and how many hours did our seniors go to. So when we have, and seniors, we can't bill for after they participate in a graduation ceremony. So like once a senior participates in a graduation ceremony, they're technically considered graduated, and we can't bill sending school districts for any days of school after the seniors participate in a graduation. So like if we have a graduation ceremony on like Tuesday the 6th, and school doesn't end until Friday, June 9th, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we have to drop off from billing, and you're not able to do that. We've had discussions about a post end of year graduation as well. Like if the last day of school is the 7th, then have it after that. We talked about the weekend after that. That's something that's up for discussion. Next year's graduation date is not necessarily set in stone. When we've had the midweek ones, we've always tried to get it as close to the end of the school year as possible. But with snow days, we would contract with, say, Lincoln University for like Wednesday in this particular calendar. Can we get graduation on the last day of school? And then we have, 3 days of snow, and then the seniors are graduating on the 7th, but now the last day of school is pushed all the way to June 12th. So it's kind of a shot in the dark with some of our scheduling, because we don't have a stadium where we can hold our own outside graduation and just say, oh, graduation's moved from the 7th to the 12th. We're usually at the mercy of some of these larger venues. And Lincoln University in particular, there's always dance competitions in June that we have to fight for dates with. Yeah, Jess, that's something that we talked about, was doing a Saturday graduation. I had surveyed senior parents 2 years ago about that, and it wasn't a favorable option, but not necessarily something I can't do again with the class of 2023.
I like the second calendar.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, they're both very close. I think that it comes down to a little bit of those half days, and if that's something that we want to move forward with as an administration and a continued conversation with the board.
I'm also in favor of the second calendar.
Okay.
I like the built-in prep time for the teachers.
Anyone else have an opinion?
I would agree with
Teachers
calendar also.
I agree with the second calendar.
I also agree. I think the second calendar looks great, and I love the idea of the built-in prep and professional development time.
Looks like you're getting a lot of comments here from the second calendar.
Mrs. Bishop's happy.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thank you, everyone.
Whatever we could do to keep Mrs. Bishop.
Right.
I think it's unanimous. I think everyone's like, all right, let's put it this way. Does anyone like the first calendar? Yep, there you go.
Sounds good. I appreciate everybody's feedback. All right.
Are you planning on putting that on the calendar or the agenda for the 24th?
Yeah, I'll put it on the working session agenda. And then that can be shared with the board. I can add it as another informational one if the board wants to make a motion and take action that night. Somebody can. Yeah. But I'll add it to Thursday to the 24th agenda. The next agenda item tonight, we had our first FID day, or structured FID day, on Friday. So we sent out a survey to teachers and to parents, and I wanted to share some of the results of that, of how that went. It was the first time that we made a call like that. Now we've been doing remote learning. We've been doing online learning. We did some asynchronous days, but the FID day was a little bit of a different structure with the delayed schedule, really only a check-in with homeroom and classroom teachers, and then independent work in lieu of calling a snow day. I did get a couple emails and saw some questions from parents that I wanted to bring up before going through this. So I tried to answer some of them in a response to parents in the email. A lot of it was about who calls snow days, what happens on snow days, what are the procedures on snow days. So early in the morning, sometimes in the evenings, administrators throughout Chester County get on a call with local township officials in the CCIU and discuss sort of road conditions and weather conditions around the county. That either happens the night before, or it'll happen at like 4:30 in the morning, the morning of. If in my email, I noted that like the topography of Chester County is very different, as well as sort of the population density. So you have the northern and eastern school districts will sometimes do one thing, while the southern and western school districts do something different. Octorara, Oxford, Avongrove, Unionville, and Kennett kind of go along usually. And then you have school districts like Westchester, to different Easttown, Owen J. Roberts, Downingtown, and Coatesville, who are in the northern and eastern sides and have different sort of geography, will do something different. And you oftentimes will see snow differ right as you kind of go through Unionville, snow totals. So if a school, we will typically follow what Avongrove School District does. We're not bound to, we don't have to, but that's sort of typically what we do. We work with them pretty hand in hand on those calls. The decision about Avongrove Charter School closing is sort of multifaceted. The first is health and safety of kids and staff related to bus transportation, standing out at bus stops, staff and senior student drivers driving in, being on the roads. That's the first concern. The second one then is we have to watch early that morning what all the other districts are choosing to do, because once a district chooses to close for inclement weather, they don't have to provide transportation to Avongrove Charter School students on that day of school. So on Friday, I believe Coatesville stayed open. So if Octorara, Oxford, Avongrove, Kennett, and Unionville all closed and did either FID days or closed, and we stayed open, none of those students would have received bus transportation. They all would have had to do parent drop-off. Only Coatesville students would have gotten a bus to school. And then it's how useful is that day? Who's actually going to drive in? And then if parents do drive in, even if we did, what are we able to facilitate that volume of car line on like state road? I don't think the township would be very happy with what that would look like. So that's oftentimes a consideration as well, is how are kids going to get to school if certain districts are closing, or if Avongrove and Coatesville close, that's 2/3 of our school, or a little bit less than that. With that many students not being provided bus transportation, what's our school day really going to look like? So that does come into play a little bit. It is nice that we now have this option to do flexible instructional days, so that days aren't just tacked on later in June after those high stakes assessments and when it's hot. So we asked the teachers some questions just to get feedback on the procedures related to the FID day call. We asked whether or not the delayed start time was helpful for them getting ready in the day. It was overwhelmingly yes. We did look at a couple different models of how we give some planning time. There's a couple school districts in Chester County who do a early release on a FID day, not a late start. We chose to go with the late start because we realized that if I'm up early and Mrs. Bishop is up early and we're making a snow call, we want to give our parents and our students and our staff as much time in the morning to make accommodations, find childcare, where are students going to be, and our teachers prepared to administer the day. So overwhelmingly, that was an important time. Did you feel like you had enough time to properly prepare for the FID day? Overwhelmingly, yes. We tried our best through the last week to communicate with our staff members that there was the possibility of inclement weather coming on Friday, to start to be prepared for if we were to call a FID day. Our teachers spoke with our students about it on Thursday. Not that we were calling school during the day on Thursday, but hey, this may happen. This is what your day can look like. So we tried to be as forthright and open with students and what that could potentially look like. And then we were able to have the opportunity to make the call Thursday night, which was always helpful for everybody planning for the next day. Next was for teachers. Do you believe the morning meeting was beneficial in helping students feel supported? Again, 3/4 said yes. I think this sort of differs if I break it down by division and age. The goal of that morning meeting was really so that students had some adult within the school that they could have contact with first thing in the morning if they had any questions or concerns about the structure of the day. It's not for synchronous instruction. It's not necessarily for extra help academically. It was really designed for, you'll have access to a staff member to ask any sort of operational questions about the day and moving forward. One feedback point that I did hear was the difficulty of all K through 12 students having the same time at 9:30. And then moving forward, could we look at maybe staggering some of them for parents who had students across multiple grade levels to try to, manage like 3 kids all in Zooms at one time because they're different grade bands was difficult, and a strain on some students' internet bandwidth. So that will be something that we can look at. That we then asked some questions of our parents. Did their child feel prepared for the FID day expectations? Overwhelming majority was agree and strongly agree. Did parents feel prepared? That's a different question. They again overwhelmingly agree and agree and strongly agree. Did parents feel like they were appropriately informed about the school's use of the FID day on that closure? That was also agreeable. We called again the night before, and I think I tried to use as many methods of notification as we have possible as a school. The amount of work that was assigned to my child, was it not enough, just right, or too much? So that's kind of my Goldilocks question. The majority said it was just right, with the next being a little bit too much. And I think that that's something that will get worked out with time as we do this a little bit more for one, students to understand how to manage their time and their day and what the day looks like, as well as for teachers to understand better how much time it takes for certain groups of students to do certain tasks that I ask them to do on an asynchronous FID day with potentially no parental support. Was my child's teachers available throughout the day as needed and responded to questions in a timely manner? Again, it was neutral, agree, or strongly agree. And then my child attended their scheduled Zoom session at 9:30. So again, we had 443 responses. This was the parents responding that their child went. So at least 94% of parents, or 95% of parents knew their child went or thought that their child went to that scheduled session in the morning. Any questions about FID days, any of that data, feedback from the day, either from parents that are on the committee or teachers that are on the committee that we can take as we go back and sort of continue to reflect on that and prepare for the potential next utilization of our second one.
Personally, as a parent, I thought it went great. I definitely liked the 9:30 meeting. I felt like having a middle schooler and a high schooler, that it really worked good to get them started and get their attention to get towards going to do what needed to be done today.
Yeah, Brian, I would agree with that. I think the staggered start times would be nice, especially for those of us teachers who have kids of our own. I was able to attend very well to my own high school students, but my own children were left basically to their own devices, and my 8-year-old kind of struggled a bit with that. Also, if we could make that homeroom time strongly encouraged, but not push it so much as required, I think that might relieve some of the stress on the parents as well. I made it very clear in all of my communication that although I encouraged the kids to attend homeroom, I was available all day for any concerns via email, which could alleviate some of that rush, that stress, that anxiety over having to get to that homeroom meeting.
Okay. Marielle's asked a question about the data on the percent of students completing assignments. So we asked the staff what they thought the percentage of students who completed assignments on that day was. We should have given options in that question, Marielle, because the variance in the number of responses made it hard to kind of come up with an average because it was an open-ended response question. We probably should have given like a range of people to a range of options for the staff. I can go back in and dig into that more, but 100 and some staff members all gave different numbers.
I was just surprised at how few of my students actually did their work, and I have really good students. So I was just curious if other people kind of saw that as well.
Mine was the opposite, Marielle. Almost all of mine did it.
I got a ton of feedback about how much kindergartners love Zoom because they never did it before. I thought that was funny.
Well, we had a little bit of PTSD about Zoom, so we're like, oh goodness.
Yes, the kindergarten students were adorable. They loved Zoom. They had never done it before. So it was just new and exciting. And they were like asking me today, actually, when we could do it again. So.
All right, sorry, I'm taking notes on staggering times and all right. Any other feedback? Yeah, I mean, hopefully we don't have to use it again so that we don't have inclement weather, but we can work on some of the messaging as well as the expectations being a little bit more clear for students moving forward if we were to use it again. The last item on tonight's agenda is a scope of work review for, and this is sort of the first, this is the first time that this is going to be brought up. It's something that is part of our strategic plan related to the schedule analysis at State Road and the potential of reaching out for some extra help to facilitate that review process from a consultant's perspective. So throughout this fall, I had been reaching out and discussing sort of what our goals were from a master schedule, as well as the building project and the goal of trying to have the potential of a new schedule align with the opening of the proposed middle school and high school building project that we've been talking about. And part of the strategic plan goal that was in our comprehensive plan, one of the steps was to garner information and proposals from outside consultants to help come in and facilitate the analysis and build process with us. One, to help from a professional consultant standpoint, and two, to hold us accountable for this major undertaking. I spoke to a number of individuals and companies, and I'm sharing tonight one of the consultant scope of work that I think is a good option moving forward based on the evaluation of some of the other individuals. So the company's called ISM. It's Independent School Management. They are a group out of Delaware that predominantly works with independent, private, and parochial schools. Why I reached out to them is because I think that many of the constraints and difficulties that we have within our State Road campus relate back to models that you often see in private, parochial, and Catholic schools. And that's things like sharing staff across divisions, teachers teaching both in middle school and high school, specials teachers teaching over multiple grade levels, students, wider ranges of student ages within one building area. Cafeteria constraints, gymnasium constraints, those are things you oftentimes see in those types of schools. And this group has done a lot of consultant work over the years with those types of constraints. So they have given a proposal to us that really takes through a 9 to 18-month process. They basically would come in and look at the process is very straightforward. It's an advanced material and survey review. So we as a school would send to them our current schedule, our current staffing, their certifications, our building layouts, our room schedules, our handbooks, our program of studies, our policies, our admissions materials, everything that has to do with sort of time and human capital. And they would sort of do an overview and an evaluation of it. And then they would facilitate digital surveys of our students, parents, and faculty related to the master schedule, instructional time, pedagogy, parental and student and staff perception. So that's all done prior. They would then come in as a group and conduct a 5-day site visit where they would tour and interview and develop a schedule design proposal for us. So during that 5-day site visit, they would tour the buildings. They would evaluate the buildings and the schedules. They would watch sort of transitions. They would and they would hold focus groups with students and teachers about operations and instruction and pedagogy. They would also, within that 5-day site visit, hold a separate 3-hour meeting with school administration that would really focus on budget, the schedule analysis and options, staffing constraints. It would be with the human resources department. And after gathering more of that information, they would start to talk about, here are options and ways you can go about meeting some of your goals that you've set out in your plan. And an example goal is in the middle school, we would really like additional intervention time in the middle of the day. And I'm just picking something out of the sky. So if that's a goal, they would sort of build schedule models to help us meet that goal within our current staffing and physical space constraints. They then do a 4-hour presentation that's open to the staff and parents. So I would really need to align this to an in-service day where they sort of share everything. What they saw, what we do well, how our schedule currently works, what models they think would work for our students, and what our staff have said and what our parents have said. So that's an open presentation to staff and stakeholders. And then they give us a thorough written report and evaluation with all of their recommendations, along with those potential schedule models to adopt. After that, they also then provide ongoing support. So once they've done their analysis and their evaluation and they turn that over to us, we as a school really need to make a decision on what we want to do. And they provide ongoing support through that planning and implementation process. And then they will also come back, if desired, to do teacher and staff professional development related to any type of schedule change. So an easy example is if you went to a longer instructional period than what we currently have, teaching and learning sort of changes. So if you went from like 45 to a 90-minute block, that doesn't mean you just do 2 lessons in one period. How you teach and how your curriculum is facilitated starts to change, and that theory of instruction starts to change. So they would come back and help us train our staff on how to effectively plan and teach in the model that we would deploy. So again, things that they look at is the design of schedules and our schedule parameters, the availability of time in our day. When do we start our day? When do we end our day? What type of flexibility do we have with that? Our crossover faculty, our faculty load and efficiency. So does our schedule effectively utilize our staff, or do we overload staff, and how can we be better efficient with that time? Program and policy reviews. The physical plant space is an extremely important one. How do we use our physical plant, our classrooms, our buildings, our physical space? And then again, providing that the options for flexibility and scheduling, and how we can attack some of those difficult pieces like the cafeteria, like the gym, those singleton areas that we have to have multiple grade levels to utilize. So that's sort of like their long proposal in a nutshell. Any questions about that? I just went through a lot of information.
Brian, are there other schools that have used this company?
So there's a lot of schools that have used this company, but no public schools that have used the company. They really only work with independent private schools and Quaker schools. Initially, when I reached out to them, they told me that they weren't really able to work with us because we're a public school. I was persistent, and then they have a subsidiary company called Charter M that works with charter schools that are based out of Radnor. And I was able to connect with them, and then was able to get independent school management to work with us. They do have reviews. I can get references. There's plenty of schools, both in the United States and internationally, that the company has worked with.
No,
We've
sure.
we've used a company that the school districts have used in the past, and it hasn't worked for us because of what Brian described earlier, being that we have shared teachers and so forth. And it was kind of a waste of our money because we didn't get much from that. I'm sure some of the people on this committee were actually on that committee back then. So we're hoping that we use a group, or we're recommending that we use a group that is more affiliated with working with schools like ours.
And the one thing that ISM did offer more than any other one, and it is reflected in the cost, which is on the next slide, or the proposed cost, is they more than any other group that I had talked with and spoke with, went through the journey with us. Many of the other consultants was just short blips, like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to talk about scheduling models and scheduling theories, and then you're kind of on your own. This ISM was much more, no, we're going to review everything, we're going to work with you, and then we're going to go through the process of how, from the first discussion through implementation with you, through a support process, as opposed to just coming in, sharing information, and then leaving us to our own devices to try to make decisions and then see it through implementation.
Now, will they be working with the school as far as, I know some of the things have been discussed about starting at a later start time. So do they have some of the goals for the district in mind that they'll be working with also?
So that's something that we can add in as a discussion topic through this. And that kind of goes into that availability of time and what our day looks like. Start times is always a fun conversation because we don't control our busing, and it can be a difficult conversation with some of our sending school districts when you start to mess with their bus routes. I will say though that Avon Grove School District is opening a new high school in the fall, and they have not finalized when their start times are for the new Avon Grove High School, what would be the middle school. Those two buildings are no longer on a shared campus, and that will undoubtedly affect the start times of those two buildings and the busing arrangements that we currently have with them. So we're still waiting on some information on that. That's just going into next year. But that's something that can be discussed. I think that was Charity that just said that is something that can be discussed. But district transportation is always that sort of constraint there.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, do they have like their own set of goals, like, or their own model, or are they coming in to implement some of the goals that you guys have prior to?
Sure. So through that advanced preparation part, they would be collecting sort of like what our goals were. If that was one of them, then it would be, let's talk about schedule models that could help you reach that goal. I think from speaking with them, that like written report and that schedule analysis and options all comes from the focus groups, the survey data, the goals that are shared. What do we as a school want to see for our teachers and our students and our school community, and how can our schedule support that? And if later start time is a top one, that could be a discussion topic through that process.
Thank you for that answer. I was just wondering if they had like their own model that they try to get schools to implement, or if it's more one-on-one.
Yeah,
So
no, the goal is to tailor that model to what we would want to see. All right. So is Donna on the call? I thought I saw Donna come in.
I am.
So this would be, that's the next slide, Donna. So this would be the proposed timeline. You'd be in spring of 2022 would be us, reviewing contract agreements and making a decision on whether or not we wanted to move forward with this contract proposal. So again, this is just a proposal from them as a group. In the fall of 2022, so this fall would be when we would look to schedule our site visit. And that would be when they held that 5-day site visit, and we would need to get professional development days to align to that site visit. After that site visit, we'd be utilizing the rest of next year through the spring to look at build scenarios and schedule scenarios. Then in the fall of 2023, it would be making a decision on, all right, what do we want the schedule to look like from those build scenarios? Which one do we want? What impact does that have on teaching? Do we need to hire teachers? What impact does that have on our physical plan and on our budget moving forward? And adopt a scenario. Then in the spring of 2024, begin professional development on whatever build model we chose, with the goal to launch the new schedule with the potential building opening in fall of 2024. Now that's 2 asterisks right there. That's one, can we get the work done by the fall of 2024 for the schedule, as well as a big asterisk on would the potential building be completed, done, and ready to open in fall of 2024. That would be like stars aligning if we can have that happen. The consultant costs are tiered based on experience. So and again, this is looking at like a 9 to 18 month commitment on their behalf. Roxanne Higgins is what's her title? Is the president of ISM and the most experience in this field within the consultant group. So if we would want to work with her directly, it's a higher cost. And then there are 3 other individuals within this consulting firm that work specifically with school schedules and school models that you could choose from. It's kind of like a menu of who you would want to work with, but they're tiered differently based on their years of experience in this field and this consulting work. So we basically could pick who we wanted to work with if money was a factor into moving forward with a proposal like this. So that would be the cost that you'd be looking at. So just wanted to share and up for discussion. This is again additional conversations administration and the board, not something that we're looking on moving for any type of action this month or anytime soon, but needed to start to put this out there and to see if there was anything from the strategic planning committee's perspective that needed to be included or shared with ISM as we continue to discuss this, since the master schedule is a major school goal within our strategic plan.
Brian?
Yep.
It's Nancy. Yeah, I may have missed this. Is this for the entire school, both sites, K to 12, or just upper school?
It's mainly upper school, but what will happen is ISM will also look at the 4 to 6 schedule, because they kind of all sandwich together. So it's predominantly state road. It's more so 7 to 12, but 4 to 6 will be sort of folded in the evaluation to make sure all those puzzle pieces fit.
Now, is there already previously a budget for this?
No, this would be something to put into upcoming year's budgets.
Brian, is that a one-time fee?
One time. And then there's always additional things. If you want more, you can always pay for more, but this would cover the proposal that they had given me for that sort of first conversation through implementation.
Brian, you may have already said this and I missed it, but are these like people that are like 4 separate people that are bidding, or are these like the 4 individuals from the company?
These are 4 individuals from the company. So it's kind of like, if you want to, I guess it's like, if you want to work with our top person, it'll cost this. If you want to work with somebody who's still very good, still lots of experience, but hasn't been doing this as long as, this other person, this would be what it costs. So it's not 4 different people bidding.
Okay, thank you.
Do they let you interview them or talk to all different ones? Because sometimes you may find one you click with.
Yep, I've spoken with Roxanne already, just because as the president and the CEO of the company, she was sort of in our initial conversations and my follow-ups, just about getting more information about ISM, how they'd help me, what our goals were to make sure that they were able to help. I have not spoken to the other 3, but absolutely can ask for quick interviews with them just to see whose personality might work best with us. I think that's a good idea.
I think it's a good thing for a couple of you to talk to them.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's all I have for tonight's meeting. If there's anything else that needs to be discussed or shared.
Anything else? Other comments, questions?
I have one question.
Oh, go right ahead.
I do enrollment, so I'm getting questions from people on the start of school. Do you know when the new calendar will be released and official?
Well, both of those drafts that we just shared tonight had, what was it, August
28th,
29th
29th.
as the first day of school.
So I can kind of hold to that a little bit.
Yeah, Nancy, and it will be recommended for this next board meeting for a board vote. So I don't know, Dwayne, if you see any potential problems that way, but I think by the end of January, we should have a vote on that.
Yeah, I would see it. I don't think there's any. I personally don't see any questions. I can't speak for the other 6 members, but I think it'll pass.
That's good. I just need the start of school is what they're asking because of vacations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Dwayne, what I'm going to do in for the January meeting is I'm going to give the board draft looks at what the following 2 school years would look like with this same type of model of a pre-Labor Day and a week of spring break. So you can see if you make a decision on, a week of spring break, is that something that's sustainable over the next couple of years and we're not flip-flopping back and forth for consistency's sake.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. That would be great. All right. Any other? Yes, both calendars do have a pre-Labor Day start. If there's no other questions, our next meeting looks like it is February 8th. Am I correct? Yes, February 8th, Brian. Does that look right to you?
I'm pulling up my calendar. Hold on. February
Okay. And we should be good to go. So there's nothing else. We will call the meeting to adjournment and until next month. All
Great.
right.
Swing.